Hi everyone, it's Friday, October 10th, 2008. Welcome to another edition of the Blog Report. Let's look at what we have at Technorati Blogger Central. Technorati Blogger Central, the top tags are news, politics, Barack Obama, Sarah Palin, John McCain, business, economy, economics, media, news by RMC. But the real issue of the day is the economy, and that's where we're going to start. The day today was unquestionably one that I can only describe as wild. Listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. Today we opened with the market down 600. It went up 678, down 300, then up in an amazing rally, 778 points. Then it fluctuated 300 points for the rest of the day, and now as I speak it's down approximately 126 points, and it might close somewhere in that area. Why? Because right now the Dow has dropped below 9,000. It's been playing around the 8,500 area. Some people think that the price shakeout is not done. It could go as low as 7,500 before we have what someone once described as a violent recovery. But the truth of the matter is that no one really knows. What everyone does know is that what was once, just as recently as 3 weeks ago, a United States problem is now a worldwide problem. And it demonstrates front and center how interconnected the world is. Remember, right after the bailout bill was announced, there was a tepid response by the market. But then the next week, the Asian markets, this week, the Asian markets started to fall, followed by Europe and the rest of the economies, which comprise 55% of the world's gross domestic product. And now, even the economies of Russia, China, and let me try that again. And that doesn't include communist countries like Russia and China, which also are now being affected by the same crisis that started here. Again, what happened? It's not that we had mortgage-backed securities, which went bad because all of a sudden people who had loans couldn't afford them. No, again, it's loss of jobs. We have had an unprecedented drop in job creation over the past 10 years, creating roughly, at best, 5 million jobs over 10 years, whereas in the past decades, we've created 20 million jobs each decade. We, on top of that, have faced an enormous drop in the civilian labor force participation rate. In other words, those Americans that are out there in the labor force either working or looking for work who filed unemployment. We have an unprecedented number of people who aren't even recorded in our system anymore, which means that our very way of recording unemployment rates is in danger, and many people charge now that our unemployment rate is actually undercounted. Again, undercounted, which means that if you have a 5% rate of unemployment, it could be 10% or greater. The bottom line is we don't know. But we all know that the major culprit of this is lack of jobs. This problem has not yet been addressed. What we're addressing are symptoms of the overall economic problem. Everyone's talking about the symptoms. They're talking about the banks. They're talking about the changes in investment banks. They're talking about how to secure unsecured securities out there. But those are symptoms of the overall economic problem. We haven't addressed it, and that's you. When I present my Zennie plan, it will impact the 138 million American taxpayers directly. And it will be the first true, if you want to call it, bailout bill for the rest of us. And I figured out a way to finance it. I'm very excited to explain it to you, and I will next week. But getting back to the news of the day, it's been a wild ride to watch the market fluctuate. No one really knows where it's going to go. We could have another bottoming out next week. We may have a rally. My bet, however, is that if this G7 meeting that's occurring as I speak in Washington doesn't produce any good public relations news that calms the market next week, we're going to continue to see a sell-off. It's incumbent upon our leaders to fashion a plan that is not just fixing one aspect of the economy, but several of them. Additionally, the fact that the G7 is meeting and trying to figure out a world response to the problem underscores how interrelated we are. Some people who would consistently chime into my channel who are Ron Paul fans would argue against the world economy and the world order and all this stuff. But look, the bottom line is that money and capital can now be accessed around the world. You want proof? Morgan Stanley is dying. Right now, it's valued at approximately $8 billion, whereas at one point, it was several times that in value. Mitsubishi Corporation, Japanese organization, is negotiating for the proper price to acquire Morgan Stanley. That's another example of foreign direct investment, but it's very common. It's common not only in the financial services industry, it's common in the defense industry, where many American defense contractors are being bought by foreign organizations. And it's going to continue. You can't stop it. You cannot stop the flow of capital around the world. What you can do as an American citizen is advocate for subsidy programs that assist American businesses and allow American businesses to not only grow, but maintain American employment at living wages. That's what you're going to have to do, because right now, our economic structure is changing such that the addition of new markets in first Japan, then Korea and Taiwan, and now China and several other countries, market economies that we favor the creation of, have essentially ripped our system apart. And our very standard of living is suffering from it. But because our standard of living is suffering from it, the credit markets are suffering from it. You know, it used to be in the days 25 years ago that one could say I have a below investment grade bond, as Michael Milken did, and prove that because the economy was so healthy that the payments on that bond could be met at nice rate premiums and make that bond attractive. Hence the junk bond market, which is really the beginning of this entire system of different types of securities and derivatives. That's where it started. But all of that worked when the economy was consistently growing and it was healthy. We don't have that anymore. We have the world economy having ripped apart our economy with outsourcing of jobs and plant closures, and it's taken its toll. The problem is structural. Each time you hear someone talk about the financial services industry or the housing market, those are symptoms of the overall problem. It's really simple, ladies and gentlemen. It really is simple. What does it take to pay a bill? It takes a job. It takes money. How do you get it? And if you don't have it, what happens? It's not only that you're not able to pay it, but the person that needs the money aren't able to make their obligations either, and then you have a ripple effect. And that's what's happening. Okay? It's not a complicated problem. It's complicated in terms of the structure of financing within the segments of the economic sector that are affected, but the overall problem isn't complicated at all. Now, I'm going to turn to the matter of politics, the other hot item in the blogger report, or the Technolarity Blogger Central report system. Earlier this week, on Monday, Senator John McCain and Governor Palin held a rally in Wisconsin, I believe, where there was a great deal of anger. Actually, Ohio was a great deal of anger. And in fact, one person in the crowd was said to have yelled out, "Kill him," in response to Governor Palin's protestation that Barack Obama was some terrorist. And then another person in the crowd yelled at an African-American sound engineer, calling him the N-word and boy and everything else. You know, it's this kind of behavior that's reprehensible to many Americans. And for some particular reason, this new breed of what I call couch potato conservatives can't think beyond their own hate. They don't really understand what it means to be a conservative in the intellectual tradition of William F. Buckley or the current intellectual tradition of George Will, who I might add does not like the choice of Sarah Palin. These are reasoned people, people who have an understanding of what it means to be a conservative, in that you analyze a social change and determine its importance before approving it. That's what real conservatives do. It has nothing to do with opposing affirmative action or questioning someone of color or anything of that nature. No. Real conservatives are true intellectuals. Couch potato conservatives are hate mongers. That's the difference. The McCain-Palin ticket is attracting the couch potato conservative. The McCain-Palin ticket is attractive to the hate monger. Now, what do we do about that as a society? Well, the very simple act that we can take on, and I've taken on, is I directly address people who behave that way, and I explain to them, as I've said many times on my channel, that racism is a mental illness, first. Second, that our problems, particularly right now, are far bigger than their own hate. And the unfortunate fact of the matter is that as our economic problems worsen, they're only going to see their own hate, which is why it's very important that we straighten out our economic problems as soon as possible. But ultimately, my decision is to do what I have done for 2 years now. Volunteer for and advocate on behalf of Senator Barack Obama and encourage everyone I know, even people who do not agree with me, to vote for Senator Barack Obama and Joe Biden to get our country moving again. And I might add that given the need for our world governments to collaborate and fashion a world financial and economic solution to this crisis, the importance of having a leader that wants to reach out and improve our relations with our friends in Europe and in the Pacific Rim has never been more important than it is right now. That's why Barack Obama is a better choice than John McCain. That's one reason. And when Senator Obama is there as president, it will change race relations as we know it. And this new breed of couch potato conservatives will finally understand what we're trying to say. That it really doesn't matter what color you are. It's the power of your ideas and your ability to execute them. That's what matters. That's really what matters. Oh, and while I'm on the subject of John McCain, did you see the African-American man at the McCain rally that said, "I beg you, I plead with you, I implore you to get tough on Barack Obama"? That guy was a plant. Look, I'm going to be absolutely real with you. Not that I have never not been real with you, but he's the only African-American man. He's well-dressed in a suit among the sea of white people, some of whom are using the N-word and undoubtedly used it before they realized this guy was going to speak. And here he comes, and he says, "Oh, I plead with you, Senator McCain, to be tough with Barack Obama." And if you look at that tape, you could see the crowd just sort of pause for a moment as if to say, "Oh my God, he is a black man saying these things. We can't believe it." And then they cheered, and then McCain gave him a hug. Remember how Senator Clinton used to have plants at her rallies, people who were pre-assigned to ask a question? I think, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that this guy was a plant. And I want someone to prove me wrong. Find that guy. I bet you bottom dollar he was a plant. If he wasn't paid to do that, then someone asked him if he would come in and say some words against Barack Obama for this rally. I'll bet you that happened. Now, let's see what's happening in the world of sports. Just have a little fun and change the subject for a bit. What's happening in sports? What's hot right now in sports is the AL Championship Series. It says with Lowell hurt, Kotsay moves to infield. But what's interesting is that sports, the other rising news stories by attention is McCain camp at odds over harsh attacks, which is what I was talking about just a little while ago, so we're not going to pay attention to that one. I've got to be honest, folks, the Boston Red Sox Tampa Bay Devil Rays series, it's hard for me to even say that, just doesn't excite me. Are you excited about it? Okay, maybe you live in Tampa. Okay, or maybe you live in Boston. Fine. But think about it. Would it be more exciting if it were Boston versus the New York Yankees? Sure. Boston versus Chicago? Sure. Boston the A's? Sure. Houston? Sure. Why? Well, they're major cities. What is Tampa Bay? Well, you say Tampa, St. Pete, but the simple fact that you have to say Tampa, St. Pete underscores the point. It's not one major city. It's this collection of little, like, hamlets looking for a city. They haven't found it. So how do you get excited about that? You know, part and parcel of the reason we get excited about these sports team matchups is our idea, or even our prejudice, of what we think those cities represent. But we can't wrap your mind around Tampa Bay Devil Rays or Tampa St. Pete. It's just hard for me. Say the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah, it sounds more like a gang than representative of a city. And I love head coach John Gruden. But Tampa Bay Devil Rays, Tampa Bay Bucks, Tampa Bay. What really is Tampa Bay? And more importantly, who cares? I don't. I'm sure it's showing up in the ratings for baseball. I haven't checked. Is it good for baseball? Of course it's good for baseball in that it makes baseball relevant in Florida. But overall, baseball just isn't the popular sport that it used to be. Now, I still like baseball. I still regard it as America's other pastime with respect to football. But it doesn't excite me. Part of the reason is that baseball isn't as prevalent in the inner city as it used to be. Major League Baseball doesn't take its dollars and seed organizations in high schools and middle schools throughout the country, where possible, to keep baseball going when little kids are playing it. Because part of the excitement of sports is that when I was a kid, I paid attention to baseball and football. We argued about it. We had these little bitty bets in high school. Shh, don't tell anybody about it, right? But do you hear that anymore with baseball much? No. Do you hear kids betting on soccer games? No. Do you hear kids talking about soccer games? No. That's why soccer is not big in America, because they're not playing it on as large a competitive official level to make it relevant and popular and thereby assure its ascendancy through our generations. That's the problem. So back to it, the bottom line is Boston, Tampa Bay Devil Rays. I'm going to say this tepidly. Go Red Sox.